The universe was vast, and humanity had always wondered if they were alone in it. For centuries, Earth's scientists scanned the skies with telescopes and radio signals, hoping to find proof of intelligent life beyond their planet. But nothing could have prepared them for what happened on that crisp autumn morning when representatives from the Galactic Union arrived. Earth had been invited, or rather, summoned, to join this interstellar alliance after decades of covert observation by advanced alien civilizations. The news spread like wildfire across the globe, igniting both excitement and fear among humans. Some saw it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Others worried about losing control of their destiny. Despite the mixed reactions, world leaders agreed that humanity couldn't ignore such a monumental invitation. Preparations began immediately for the historic event known as First Contact Day. On the outskirts of Geneva, Switzerland, a massive gathering took place at the newly constructed Interstellar Diplomatic Center. Flags representing nations fluttered alongside banners bearing strange symbols of alien empires. Reporters jostled for position, cameras clicking furiously as delegations from over 30 extraterrestrial species disembarked from sleek spacecraft. Their appearances ranged from humanoid figures with shimmering skin to beings resembling floating orbs of light. Each step they took seemed deliberate, calculated, as though every movement carried meaning. Among these envoys stood Princess Zenera Vex, heir to the throne of Tyloth VII, an aquatic civilization thriving beneath ice-covered oceans. Her translucent blue-green scales shimmered under artificial lights, and delicate fins framed her face like a crown. To human eyes, she appeared ethereal, almost otherworldly, but there was no mistaking the sharp intelligence gleaming in her large, multifaceted eyes. Zenera wasn't just here for diplomatic formalities. She had a personal mission: to understand Earthlings better. As part of her studies on interspecies biology, she'd reviewed countless reports on human anatomy, physiology, and behavior. Yet one detail had caught her attention more than anything else: the fact that humans didn't follow breeding cycles. Breeding cycles? Whispered Ambassador Loris, a stout Trillian delegate seated next to her during the opening ceremony. His voice crackled through his translator device. "You're still hung up on that? It's not uncommon among warm-blooded species." "But we do," Zenera replied softly, careful not to draw attention. "Every Tylothian knows when the tides align perfectly, signaling the start of our cycle. We don't mate outside those times. It's biologically impossible. How can humans endure such chaos?" Loris chuckled, his bulbous body quivering slightly. Perhaps chaos is what makes them unique. As speeches droned on, Zenera found herself distracted. Her mind kept returning to the concept of human reproduction. On Tyloth VII, everything followed precise rhythms dictated by nature. From feeding patterns to social interactions, life revolved around predictable cycles. Even emotions ebbed and flowed according to biological needs. But humans, they mated whenever they pleased, driven by factors Zenera struggled to comprehend: love, desire, societal norms. It sounded inefficient. And yet, somehow, humanity thrived despite, or perhaps because of, it. Her curiosity deepened during a scientific symposium later that day. Human experts presented findings on genetics, psychology, and cultural practices surrounding family structures. One researcher, Dr. Elena Cruz, captivated Zenera with her passionate explanation of how emotional bonds influenced reproductive decisions. According to Elena, love wasn't merely a fleeting feeling. It shaped entire lifetimes, influencing choices far beyond procreation. Watching Elena speak, Zenera felt a pang of envy. Could humans truly experience such profound connections without the constraints of timing or biology? Was freedom really worth the unpredictability it brought? After the presentation, Zenera approached Elena cautiously, introducing herself under the guise of academic interest. "Your research is fascinating," she said, her words filtered through a universal translator. "I've never encountered a species so adaptable." Elena smiled warmly, seemingly unfazed by the alien standing before her. "Adaptation is kind of our thing," she joked. "But I think you'd be surprised how much we struggle to. Love isn't always easy, even if it feels limitless." Their conversation lingered in Zenera's mind long after the symposium ended. Humans were unlike any species she'd ever studied. Their lack of breeding cycles hinted at something deeper, complexity rooted in emotion rather than instinct. And while Zenera still grappled with the idea, she couldn't deny its allure. As night fell over Geneva, casting stars across the sky, Zenera gazed out a window aboard her vessel. Earth looked small yet vibrant against the blackness of space. Somewhere down there, amidst billions of individuals living chaotic lives, lay answers to questions she hadn't even thought to ask. Perhaps understanding humans would unlock secrets not just about them, but about herself as well. Back aboard her sleek, silver spacecraft hovering in Earth's orbit, Princess Zenera Vex couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in her mind. The symposium had ended hours ago, but the human researchers' words lingered like an unsolved puzzle. Dr. Elena Kruz's explanation of love and emotional bonds gnawed at her curiosity. How could such intangible concepts shape something as fundamental as reproduction? On Xyloth 7, everything followed clear biological signals. Tidal rhythms dictated when life began, not abstract feelings or societal pressures. Zenera paced the dimly lit chamber of her quarters, her fins rippling faintly with agitation. She tapped a clawed finger against the holographic display floating before her, scrolling through files on human biology. Her advisors had warned her not to dwell too long on Earth's peculiarities. Focus on diplomacy, they'd said. Their ways are inefficient. Why waste time studying chaos? But Zenera wasn't convinced. Chaos fascinated her. It was unpredictable, untamed, a stark contrast to the rigid order of her own world. Humans didn't follow breeding cycles, yet their population thrived. They mated out of love, convenience, obligation, even accidents, and somehow their species endured. To Zenera, it felt like staring into a kaleidoscope where patterns shifted endlessly, refusing to settle into anything recognizable. Her musings were interrupted by a soft chime. Turning, she saw her assistant, Kale, enter the room. Kale was a trusted aide, his dark scales blending seamlessly with the shadows. "Your Highness," he began hesitantly, "the Emperor has requested updates on your progress." Zenera sighed, waving a dismissive hand. "Tell him I'm gathering valuable insights. Humanity is complex." She paused, glancing at the hologram again. "I need more time." Kale hesitated, his multifaceted eyes reflecting concern. "You know the Council expects results, not curiosity projects. If you spend too long here, they may question your priorities." "I'm aware," Zenera replied sharply, though without malice. She softened her tone after a moment. "But Kale, don't you see? These humans, they're unlike anything we've encountered. Their lack of breeding cycles isn't just biological. It's cultural, emotional. I have to understand why." Kale tilted his head, considering her words. "Very well, Your Highness, but tread carefully. Curiosity can lead to complications." Complications. Zenera mulled over the word as Kale excused himself. Complications were inevitable when dealing with aliens, weren't they? Still, she couldn't ignore the pull toward Earth, or its people. Especially one person in particular. The next morning, Zenera submitted a formal request to the Galactic Council for extended observation privileges. Under strict guidelines, she would be allowed to remain on Earth temporarily, provided she maintained her disguise and avoided interference. Pleased with the approval, she prepared for her descent. Disguising herself proved easier than expected. A simple shimmering cloak concealed her fins, while subtle makeup altered her facial features just enough to pass as humanoid. Her translator device disguised her voice, smoothing out its aquatic undertones. With these preparations complete, Zenera landed near a quiet coastal town chosen for its proximity to marine ecosystems, a nod to her supposed role as a xenobiologist. Her arrival drew little attention. The townsfolk were accustomed to visitors during tourist season, and Zenera blended in easily. She rented a small cottage overlooking the ocean, its windows offering stunning views of crashing waves. It reminded her of home, though the salty breeze carried unfamiliar scents, wood smoke, blooming flowers, and something sweet she later learned was called coffee. To establish credibility, Zenera introduced herself as a researcher specializing in aquatic life. She claimed to be conducting studies on local marine habitats, a cover story that aligned perfectly with her interests. Within days, she crossed paths with Dr. Elena Cruz, who worked at a nearby research facility. Fate, or perhaps coincidence, had brought them together again. Elena greeted her warmly, unaware of Zenera's true identity. "So, you're staying in town?" she asked, sipping tea during their first meeting at a cozy cafe. "Yes," Zenera replied, careful to modulate her tone. "Your presentation intrigued me. I thought this would be an ideal place to continue my work." "Well, welcome to Haven Cove," Elena said with a smile. "It's not exactly bustling with activity, but there's plenty to explore if you're into nature." As weeks passed, Zenera immersed herself in human culture, observing interactions with growing fascination. She attended community events, visited markets, and even joined a book club, though she struggled to grasp metaphors. Each encounter revealed new layers of complexity. Humans laughed, argued, celebrated, mourned, all driven by emotions that defied logic. Love, jealousy, ambition, loyalty. It baffled her how they navigated such turbulence without collapsing under its weight. Yet beneath the chaos lay resilience. Families welcomed newborns with joy, supported each other through hardships, and built lives around shared dreams. Watching parents dote on children, Zenera felt a pang of longing. Xylothian offspring were raised communally, their development guided by strict protocols. Personal attachment rarely factored into the equation. Was it possible that emotional bonds made humans stronger, not weaker? Her questions multiplied, fueling an obsession she couldn't suppress. Every conversation with Elena deepened her understanding and complicated her mission. Though Zenera hid her true nature, she found herself drawn to the human scientist's warmth and wisdom. Elena's explanations of human behavior challenged everything Zenera believed about efficiency and order. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Elena turned to her with a curious expression. "You ask a lot of questions," she remarked lightly. "Not that I mind. It's refreshing. Most people don't think about things like breeding cycles unless they're trying to avoid them." Zenera froze, caught off guard. "Breeding cycles?" Elena laughed, mistaking her reaction for confusion. "Yeah, like animals having mating seasons. Humans don't have those. We're kind of always on." "Always on," Zenera repeated softly, tasting the phrase. "Always on." The idea still struck her as chaotic, but also strangely liberating. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength wasn't its adaptability. It was its refusal to conform to rigid rules. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Zenera realized her journey was far from over. Understanding humans meant confronting contradictions within herself, and though she didn't yet know where this path would lead, one thing was certain: she couldn't turn back now. The days in Haven Cove passed like waves lapping against the shore, steady yet unpredictable. For Princess Zenera Vex, each moment brought new revelations about humanity, reshaping her understanding of life itself. Her interactions with Dr. Elena Cruz became a cornerstone of her research, though she often found herself torn between observation and participation. The line between scientist and subject blurred more with every conversation. Elena had grown accustomed to Zenera's endless questions, though some still caught her off guard. One afternoon, as they sat on a weathered bench overlooking the ocean, Zenera leaned forward, her glowing eyes fixed intently on Elena. "Tell me," she began, "why do humans form such strong bonds before reproducing? On my world, we pair only when nature dictates it. Emotions aren't involved." Elena hesitated, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Well, for us, emotions are kind of the glue that holds everything together. Love, or connection, really, is what makes relationships meaningful. It's not just about having kids, it's about building something lasting. Zinara tilted her head, processing the idea. But isn't that inefficient? If emotions guide your choices, doesn't that lead to mistakes? Elena chuckled softly. Sometimes, yeah, people make bad decisions because of love or fear or pride. But those same emotions also push them to grow, to try again after failing. They create resilience. Resilience. The word resonated deeply with Zinara. Xylothians valued efficiency above all else, adhering to strict cycles and protocols. Failure was rare, but harshly punished when it occurred. Could emotions truly foster strength instead of weakness? Her curiosity extended beyond Elena to the townsfolk of Haven Cove. Over time, she noticed how interconnected their lives were. Neighbors shared meals, offered help during crises, and celebrated milestones together. At first glance, their actions seemed chaotic, a patchwork of individual choices, but closer inspection revealed patterns of mutual support. Even disagreements carried purpose, forcing people to confront differences rather than avoid them. One evening, Zinara attended a community gathering at the local park. Strings of lights hung from trees, casting golden glows over picnic tables laden with food. Children laughed as they chased fireflies, while adults swapped stories around crackling bonfires. Zinara watched silently, marveling at the scene. Such gatherings didn't exist on Siloth 7. Social events, there were formal affairs, governed by caste systems and rigid etiquette. Here, spontaneity reigned supreme. As she wandered through the crowd, a young couple approached her. The woman held a baby wrapped snugly in a blanket, while the man balanced plates of dessert in his hands. "You're new here, right?" the woman asked warmly. "We haven't seen you at these things before." "Yes," Zinara replied, careful to keep her tone neutral. "I'm visiting for work." "Well, welcome," the man said, handing her a slice of cake. "Hope you're enjoying our little town." Their kindness startled her. Strangers offering gifts without expectation. It was so unlike the calculated exchanges of her own society. She accepted the cake awkwardly, murmuring thanks. As they walked away, cooing over their child, Zinara felt an unfamiliar ache in her chest. What would it be like to belong so fully to another person? To share joy and responsibility so openly? Back at her cottage later that night, she replayed the evening in her mind. Humans weren't just surviving despite their lack of breeding cycles, they were thriving because of it. Their freedom to choose when and whom to partner with allowed for deeper connections, richer experiences. Yet, this realization raised unsettling questions. Did structure stifle growth? Were her people missing something vital by adhering so rigidly to tradition? Her musings were interrupted by a knock at the door. Opening it, she found Elena standing outside, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Thought you might need some company," the scientist said with a grin. "You looked deep in thought earlier." Zinara stepped aside, inviting her in. They settled by the window, sipping hot chocolate as the sound of crashing waves filled the silence. After a while, Elena spoke. "You've been asking a lot about how we live, but I feel like I barely know anything about you. Where are you from, really?" The question caught Zinara off guard. Her disguise was flawless, her cover story airtight. Yet Elena's perceptiveness unnerved her. How much could she reveal without risking exposure? "I come from a place very different from here," she admitted cautiously. "My people follow strict rules about timing. Everything has its season, including reproduction." Elena frowned, intrigued. "That sounds restrictive. Do you ever wish you could break free from it?" Zinara hesitated. The truth hovered on the tip of her tongue, but she swallowed it back. Instead, she deflected. "Perhaps, but change is difficult, even when it's necessary." Elena nodded slowly, sensing the weight behind Zinara's words. "Change can be scary, she agreed. "But sometimes it leads to beautiful things." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Zinara couldn't shake Alina's insight. Was she subconsciously yearning for change? Could humanity's chaotic ways hold lessons for her own world? Over the following weeks, Zinara continued her observations, embedding herself further into Haven Cove's rhythm. She joined volunteers cleaning up beaches, helped organize a charity bake sale, and even participated in a talent show. Her rendition of its Ilothian lullaby earned polite applause. Each experience deepened her appreciation for human unpredictability. Yet, her presence wasn't without impact. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, she began influencing those around her. A teenage boy who once shied away from public speaking gained confidence after hearing Zinara discuss her passion for science. An elderly woman rediscovered her love for painting after Zinara admired a watercolor hanging in her home. Even Alina found herself inspired by Zinara's relentless curiosity, reigniting her own drive for discovery. One day, while examining tide pools with Alina, Zinara accidentally let slip a detail about her true nature. Pointing to a cluster of starfish, she remarked, "They remind me of creatures from my homeworld. We call them lumina. They glow brighter under stress." Alina raised an eyebrow. "Your homeworld." Realizing her mistake, Zinara froze. For a moment, panic gripped her. But Alina simply smiled. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Though Zinara quickly recovered, redirecting the topic, the incident left her uneasy. Her secret was safe, for now. But how long could she hide among humans without revealing more? Despite the tension, her bond with Alina grew stronger. Their friendship transcended scientific inquiry, becoming something profound and unspoken. Zinara realized she no longer saw Alina merely as a subject of study. She was a confidant, a mirror reflecting truths Zinara hadn't dared confront. As autumn leaves turned gold and red, Zinara stood on the beach one evening, gazing at the horizon. Humanity's chaos still baffled her, but it no longer felt like a flaw. Perhaps it was a strength, one worth emulating. And perhaps, just perhaps, her journey among humans would teach her not only about them, but also about herself. Zinara's presence in Haven Cove continued to ripple through the small town like waves after a stone is cast into water. At first, her questions and observations seemed harmless, quirky, even. But over time, her influence began to shape the lives of those around her in unexpected ways. The townsfolk didn't realize it, but their interactions with the mysterious researcher were planting seeds of change that would soon blossom into something remarkable. One crisp morning, Zinara found herself sitting at a cafe table with Alina, sipping tea as sunlight streamed through the windows. Across from them sat Sarah and Mark, a young couple who had been married for 5 years but hadn't yet started a family. They often joked about being too busy or not ready, though everyone knew they secretly longed for children. That day, however, their tone was different. "We've decided to go for it," Sarah announced, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "We're going to try." Mark nodded, smiling shyly. "It feels right, you know. Like now's the time." Alina beamed at them, congratulating the pair warmly, but Zinara's gaze lingered on their faces. She sensed the shift wasn't just coincidence, it was connection. Over the past weeks, she'd listened intently as Sarah and Mark shared their fears and hopes during casual conversations. Her probing questions about human relationships had prompted them to confront doubts they'd buried deep inside. Without realizing it, Zinara had nudged them toward clarity. Later that week, another transformation unfolded. Mr. Thompson, an elderly widower known for his gruff demeanor, walked into the local library carrying a photo album. He approached the librarian, Mrs. Patel, and handed it to her. "I thought maybe you could help me send these pictures to my daughter," he said gruffly. "She lives up north. Haven't talked to her in years." Mrs. Patel blinked in surprise before nodding gently. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. Let's get started." Word spread quickly through Haven Cove about the old man's gesture. Some speculated it was guilt driving him. Others believed it was loneliness. But Zenera suspected something deeper. During a recent fishing trip, she'd asked Mr. Thompson why humans formed families if not all members stayed close. His answer, a mix of pride and regret, had clearly struck a chord. Now, inspired by her curiosity, he was reaching out to mend what had been broken. These changes weren't limited to personal relationships. At the community center, volunteers organized workshops on parenting skills, financial planning, and stress management, all sparked by discussions initiated by Zenera. People who once dismissed such topics as irrelevant suddenly saw value in preparing for life's uncertainties. Even the local school introduced new programs focused on emotional intelligence, encouraging students to express themselves openly. Yet, while Zenera marveled at humanity's capacity for growth, unease simmered beneath her calm exterior. Her actions, though well-intentioned, risked violating the Galactic Council's strict non-interference policies. Every smile, every shared moment carried the potential for unintended consequences. And then there was Elena, the one person whose perception of her mattered most. Their friendship had grown beyond professional boundaries, evolving into something neither could fully define. Elena's sharp intellect and compassionate nature captivated Zenera, challenging her preconceived notions about human fragility. In turn, Elena admired Zenera's curiosity and wisdom, finding comfort in her steady presence. Yet, despite their closeness, secrets loomed between them. One evening, as they strolled along the beach, Elena broached a topic that had weighed heavily on her mind. "You've changed this town," she said quietly, kicking a pebble into the surf. "People are talking more, opening up. It's like you've unlocked something in them." Zenera stiffened slightly, unsure how to respond. "I haven't done anything extraordinary," she replied carefully. "Humans are naturally resilient. I'm merely observing." Elena stopped walking, turning to face her. "No, Zenera, you've done more than observe. You've connected, with me, with everyone." "But," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "There's something you're not telling me. Something important." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Zenera felt her fins twitch involuntarily beneath her cloak, betraying her discomfort. She wanted to confess everything, to reveal her true identity, her mission, her growing admiration for humanity. But fear held her back. What if Elena rejected her? What if the truth shattered the fragile bond they'd built? Instead, she forced a smile, deflecting the question. "Maybe you're seeing patterns where none exist," she said lightly. "Humans have a way of attributing meaning to randomness." Elena studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "Maybe, but I don't think so." They resumed their walk in silence, the sound of crashing waves filling the gap between them. Though Zenera maintained her composure, her mind raced. How much longer could she keep her secret? And at what cost? The next day brought an unexpected complication. As Zenera browsed produce at the farmer's market, a child tugged at her sleeve. "Are you really from space?" the boy asked innocently, his wide eyes filled with wonder. Startled, Zenera knelt to meet his gaze. "What makes you say that?" He grinned, pointing to her hands. "Your skin glows funny when the sun hits it, like stars." Her heart skipped a beat. Had she let her disguise slip again? Before she could respond, the boy's mother hurried over, apologizing profusely. "Ignore him," the woman said, laughing nervously. "He watches too many sci-fi movies." Relieved, Zenera chuckled softly. No harm done. Children have vivid imaginations. But the incident left her shaken. How close had she come to exposure? If a child could notice anomalies, how long until someone else did? That night, unable to sleep, Zenera stood on her balcony, gazing at the stars. Humanity's chaos still bewildered her, yet it also inspired awe. Their ability to adapt, to grow, to embrace uncertainty, it was unlike anything she'd ever known. And though her mission remained incomplete, she realized she no longer viewed Earth solely as a subject of study. It had become home. As dawn broke over Haven Cove, Painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Zenera made a silent vow. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them, not just as an alien observer, but as someone who cared deeply about the people she'd come to understand. For better or worse, her journey among humans had changed her forever. The tension between secrecy and honesty weighed heavily on Princess Zenera Vex as days turned into weeks in Haven Cove. Her interactions with the townsfolk had become more meaningful, her bond with Alina deeper than ever. Yet the shadow of deception loomed larger with each passing moment. She knew she couldn't keep pretending forever. The question wasn't whether she'd revealed herself, it was when and how. One crisp afternoon, Zenera found herself sitting across from Alina at their favorite cafe. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked pastries, but neither woman touched their drinks. Alina's brow furrowed as she studied Zenera's face, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "You've been distant lately," Alina said finally, breaking the silence. "Is something wrong?" Zenera hesitated, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the table. She wanted to tell Alina everything, to explain who she truly was and why she'd come to Earth, but fear held her back. What if confessing shattered the trust they'd built? What if Alina saw her not as a friend, but as an outsider meddling in human affairs? "I'm fine," Zenera replied softly, though her voice betrayed uncertainty. "Just thinking about my work." Alina leaned forward, her expression earnest. "You can talk to me, you know. Whatever it is, I'll listen." Her words struck a chord deep within Zenera. For months, Alina had offered unwavering support, patience, and understanding. How could Zenera repay that kindness with lies? Taking a deep breath, she decided it was time to take the risk. "There's something I need to tell you," Zenera began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something important." Alina tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Go on." Zenera glanced around the cafe, ensuring no one else was listening. Then, slowly, she removed her shimmering cloak, revealing delicate fins framing her face and faintly glowing scales beneath her makeup. Gasps escaped nearby patrons, but Zenera focused solely on Alina. "I'm not human," she admitted, meeting Alina's gaze steadily. "I'm Princess Zenera Vex of Xyloth 7. My people sent me here to study your species, to understand why humans don't follow breeding cycles like other intelligent beings do." For a long moment, Alina simply stared, her expression unreadable. Zenera braced herself for rejection, for anger, or worse, indifference. But instead, Alina blinked, then smiled faintly. "Well," she said after a pause, "that explains a lot." Relief washed over Zenera, though confusion quickly followed. "You're not upset?" Alina shook her head, leaning back in her chair. "To be honest, I've suspected something was different about you for a while now. Your questions, your perspective, it didn't quite fit. I just never imagined you were, well, an alien princess." Despite the gravity of the situation, Zenera couldn't help but laugh, a soft, melodic sound that drew curious glances from other customers. "I suppose alien princess does have a certain ring to it." Alina chuckled too, though her smile soon faded. "Does this mean you're leaving? Or are there consequences for telling me this?" Zenera sighed, her joy tempered by reality. "My mission isn't finished yet. But yes, there will be consequences. Revealing myself violates Galactic Council rules. If anyone finds out..." She trailed off, the weight of her decision settling heavily on her shoulders. Alina reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "Then we'll figure it out together. You've done so much for this town, for me. I won't let them take that away from you." Her words filled Zenera with warmth, but also resolve. She realized she couldn't hide anymore, not from Alina, and not from herself. Humanity's chaos might lack order, but it thrived because of connection. And Zenera had formed connections she couldn't, and wouldn't, abandon. Over the next few days, Zenera shared stories of Xyloth 7 with Alina, describing its icy oceans, rigid caste systems, and controlled breeding cycles. In turn, Alina explained more about human history, culture, and emotions. Their conversations deepened their bond, blurring the lines between teacher and student, observer and participant. Meanwhile, news of Zenara's true identity spread quietly through Haven Cove. Surprisingly, the townsfolk reacted with fascination rather than fear. Children begged her to show off her fins, while adults invited her to dinners and gatherings, eager to learn about life beyond Earth's atmosphere. Even Mr. Thompson joked about having an alien friend now. But not everyone celebrated Zenara's presence. Back aboard her spacecraft orbiting Earth, Kale monitored communications nervously. Reports of her activities had reached the Galactic Council, and worse, her father, Emperor Vexer. When he contacted her via hologram, his voice carried a mix of disappointment and fury. "How dare you defy protocol?" he demanded, his scaled features contorted in anger. "You've compromised our neutrality, exposed us to scrutiny. Return to Siloth 7 immediately." Zenara stood tall, her fins stiffening in defiance. "Father, I've learned things here that could benefit our people. Humanity's adaptability, their emotional bonds, their strengths, not weaknesses. We could learn from them." Emperor Vexer scoffed. "Learn? From chaotic creatures who refuse to follow natural laws. This obsession has clouded your judgment." "It hasn't clouded anything," Zenara shot back, surprising even herself with her boldness. "It's opened my eyes. Father, what if our ways aren't perfect? What if there's another path?" Her words hung in the air, met with stony silence. Finally, Emperor Vexer spoke, his tone cold. "If you do not return voluntarily, enforcers will retrieve you. Do not make me regret calling you my daughter." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zenara shaken but resolute. She understood the risks of staying, but she also knew returning meant abandoning everything she'd come to care about. Turning to Alina, who stood nearby watching silently, she whispered, "What should I do?" Alina stepped closer, gripping her hands firmly. "Do what feels right. Not for them, but for yourself. And for us." Us. The word resonated deeply within Zenara. For the first time, she felt truly part of something greater than duty or obligation. Humanity's unpredictable nature had taught her the value of choice, and she chose to stay. As night fell over Haven Cove, Zenara gazed at the stars once more. Somewhere among those distant lights lay her homeworld, its rigid order clashing with the vibrant chaos below. Though fear lingered, hope burned brighter. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. The decision to defy her father and a galactic council weighed heavily on Princess Zenara Vex, but she knew there was no turning back. Her heart, and her growing attachment to Alina and Haven Cove, had made the choice for her. Yet defiance came with a price, one that would soon ripple across galaxies. Word of Zenara's unauthorized collaboration reached the Galactic Union swiftly, sparking heated debates among its members. Some alien delegates viewed her actions as reckless endangerment, arguing that humanity's unpredictable nature posed a threat to interstellar stability. Others saw potential in her findings, suggesting that Earth's unique culture might offer valuable lessons for other species. The divide grew wider, threatening to fracture the delicate balance of the alliance. Meanwhile, Emperor Vexer of Siloth 7 seethed with anger. His daughter's rebellion wasn't just personal, it was political. By refusing to return home, Zenara had embarrassed him publicly, undermining his authority as both a ruler and a parent. To restore order, he ordered enforcers from the Silothian military to retrieve her by any means necessary. Their arrival loomed like a storm cloud over Earth's horizon. Zenara sensed the danger approaching. Kale, still stationed aboard her orbiting spacecraft, warned her through encrypted messages. "They're preparing to land," he reported grimly. "You don't have much time." Though fear gnawed at her resolve, Zenara refused to abandon Haven Cove, or Alina. Instead, she devised a plan. Gathering the townsfolk in the community center, she revealed the imminent threat. explaining how her presence had drawn unwanted attention from beyond their world. "You've been nothing but kind to me," she told them, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude and determination. "But now, I need your help. If we stand together, perhaps we can show my people, and the rest of the galaxy, that humanity is worth protecting." The room fell silent as the gravity of her words sank in. Then, slowly, voices began to rise. Mr. Thompson stepped forward first, clutching his cane tightly. "We owe you, lass. Whatever you need, we'll do it." Others followed suit, pledging their support. Sarah and Mark volunteered to spread the word throughout town, organizing volunteers to assist however they could. Even Mrs. Patil offered the library as a makeshift command center, where plans could be coordinated safely. For a small coastal town unaccustomed to galactic politics, Haven Cove rallied with surprising unity. Alina stood beside Zanara, her expression resolute. "We're not letting them take you without a fight," she declared firmly. "If this is about showing the universe what humans are capable of, then let's give them something unforgettable." With the townsfolk united behind her, Zanara prepared to face the enforcers head-on. Using her knowledge of Silothian technology, she instructed Kale to broadcast a message directly to the Galactic Council. It would serve as both an appeal and a declaration, a plea for understanding and coexistence rather than control. As night fell, the sky above Haven Cove lit up with streaks of light as several sleek ships descended toward the town. The enforcers emerged clad in shimmering armor, their weapons humming ominously. They moved with precision, surrounding the community center where Zanara awaited them alongside Alina and dozens of determined residents. "Princess Zanara," the lead enforcer announced, his voice amplified through a translator device. "Surrender yourself immediately. Your actions jeopardize interstellar peace." Zanara stepped forward, raising her hands calmly. "I will not surrender," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "But if you wish to take me, you must go through these people, the very ones I sought to understand. Ask yourselves, is silencing them truly the answer?" The crowd murmured in agreement, standing firm despite the intimidating display of power before them. Children clutched handmade signs reading "Unity through diversity" and "Welcome aliens," while adults held lanterns aloft, casting warm glows against the cold gleam of alien weaponry. Alina stepped beside Zanara, addressing the enforcers directly. "Your princess came here seeking knowledge, and she found friendship. Isn't that what exploration is supposed to be about? Learning from each other instead of imposing rules." Her words struck a nerve. Among the enforcers, some hesitated visibly, exchanging uncertain glances. Though trained to follow orders, they couldn't ignore the courage and conviction radiating from the humans, and from their own princess. For Zanara, staying grounded in Haven Cove brought both joy and sorrow. Every sunrise reminded her of humanity's boundless potential, yet every sunset cast shadows of uncertainty over her future. Though the enforcers had withdrawn, she knew her father wouldn't give up easily. Returning home meant facing consequences she couldn't predict, but staying meant risking further conflict between Earth and Siloth 7. Alina noticed the weight on Zanara's shoulders one evening as they walked along the beach. "You've done so much already," Alina said gently, picking up a smooth pebble and skipping it across the water. "Doesn't that count for something?" Zanara sighed, gazing at the horizon. "It does, but my journey isn't finished. I have to go back, if only to show my people that peace is possible." Alina stopped walking, turning to face her. "Then I'll support you, no matter what. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" Zanara asked softly. "That you'll come back. This place, these people, we're your family now too." Tears welled in Zanara's eyes as she nodded. "I promise." Days later, under the watchful gaze of Haven Cove's residents, Zanara prepared to leave. A small ceremony was held on the beach, with lanterns strung between posts and music drifting on the breeze. People shared stories, laughter, and tears, vowing never to forget the alien princess who had taught them so much about themselves. As Zinera stepped onto her ship, she turned to address the crowd one last time. "Thank you for showing me the beauty of chaos," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I'll carry your lessons with me wherever I go, and I'll fight to ensure our worlds remain connected." With that, the hatch closed, and the ship ascended into the sky, leaving behind trails of light. Below, Alina watched until the vessel disappeared among the stars, clutching the pendant Zinera had given her as a token of their bond. Upon returning to Xyloth 7, Zinera faced her father in the grand hall of the palace. The air crackled with tension as Emperor Vexor regarded her coldly. "You've caused enough trouble," he growled. "What do you hope to achieve by challenging everything we stand for?" "I hope to inspire change," Zinera replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Father, our ways aren't perfect. Humanity has shown me that freedom, emotional, cultural, societal, can strengthen rather than weaken. Isn't it time we embraced evolution instead of clinging to stagnation?" Her words struck a chord. Though Vexor resisted initially, the growing unrest among his people forced him to reconsider. Slowly, reforms began taking shape. Discussions about loosening breeding cycle restrictions, reevaluating caste systems, and fostering greater individual autonomy. It wasn't overnight transformation, but progress nonetheless. Years passed, and news of Zinera's efforts reached Earth repeatedly. Haven Cove flourished, becoming a symbol of interstellar cooperation. Humans and aliens exchanged knowledge, art, and ideas, proving that diversity strengthened unity. One day, as Alina stood on the same beach where she bid Zinera farewell, a familiar shimmering figure emerged from the surf. Tears streamed down her face as Zinera approached, smiling warmly. "I told you I'd come back," she said simply. Together, they gazed at the stars, knowing their bond transcended worlds, and that their shared journey had forever changed the universe.